All right, let's get started here. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The smell of grilled meat hit me before I even stepped into the kitchen. Dad always went overboard when he had something to celebrate, and tonight was no exception. The backyard was loud, too loud. Laughter glasses, clinking chairs, scraping against concrete. The kind of noise that tries a little too hard to prove everything's perfect. I stood at the counter, peeling potatoes with a dull knife that should have been replaced years ago. The sink dripped every few seconds. Nobody bothered to fix it. Nobody noticed it either. They never noticed anything that didn't shine. "Victoria, you're still on kitchen duty," my aunt called from the patio, half laughing like it was a joke we'd all agreed on years ago. I didn't look up. Someone has to make sure people eat. That got a few polite chuckles. Not because it was funny, just because it was expected. Out back, Beatrice was holding court. Even from inst, I could hear her voice cutting through everything else. Confident, loud, practiced. She knew how to fill a space and make it feel like a stage. I stepped closer to the doorway, still holding the potato peeler, and leaned just enough to see her. Full uniform, fresh press, medals aligned perfectly. Captain now. She looked exactly like the version of success Dad liked to brag about. And I told them she said raising her glass, if we're going to supply drone systems at that scale, we need full operational flexibility. No delays, no red tape. A couple of Dad's friends nodded like they understood what that meant. They didn't. "It's a multi-million-dollar contract," she continued. "Pentagon level. I signed off on it myself." That got applause. Of course it did. Dad stepped in right on cue, already halfway through another drink. "That's my girl," he said, clapping her on the shoulder. "Serving the country, making real decisions." Then he turned, right toward me. He didn't even lower his voice. "Look at your sister Vic," he said, loud enough for the whole table. "She's out there protecting this country. And you—" He gestured vaguely toward the kitchen like that, explained everything. "You're 45 years old, still doing some low-level data contract job. Barely scraping by." A few people shifted in their seats. Not uncomfortable enough to stop him. Just enough to pretend they weren't part of it. Dad smirked. "I mean, come on. At some point you gotta ask yourself what went wrong." I peeled another strip of potato skin. Smooth. Even. No wasted motion. I didn't answer. There's no point correcting someone who already decided who you are. Silence makes people think they're right. It also makes them careless. And careless people leave things out in the open, like Beatrice's contract. She had left a stack of printed documents on the coffee table inside just past the sliding door. Not hidden, not secured, just sitting there like part of the decoration, because to her it was a trophy. I dried my hands on her towel and walked past it like I wasn't interested, like I hadn't already clocked it the second I walked in, but I slowed down just enough to see the header. Vendor ID, contract number, authorization code. My eyes didn't linger. They didn't need to. Training doesn't turn off just because you're at a family barbecue. I grabbed a glass from the counter and filled it with water, then leaned casually against the wall where I could still hear them talking. "And the supplier?" someone asked Beatrice. "They're reliable." She didn't hesitate. "Top tier, cleared and approved. We vetted everything." I almost smiled. "No, you didn't. Or maybe you did, and you chose not to care." I stepped back into the living room this time, a little closer to the table, close enough to catch the fine print. The contractor name confirmed it. So did the routing code buried halfway down the page. Shell Company. We'd been tracking it for 6 months. Money laundering through defense contracts. Inflated pricing, kickbacks routed through layered accounts to avoid detection. Most people would never recognize it. But I wasn't most people. And Beatrice wasn't just approving a bad contract. She was inside it. I picked up my glass and took a sip, letting my eyes move across the last section of the document. Advance payment authorization, guarantee address. I paused, read it again, then once more slower. The address wasn't a corporate office. It wasn't a government facility. It was a residential property. I knew that address. I'd memorized it decades ago. Dad's house. The room behind me erupted in laughter again. Someone told a joke I didn't catch. Chairs scraped. A bottle popped open. Normal sounds. Normal night. Except it wasn't. I set the glass down and walked back into the kitchen, picking up another potato like nothing had changed. Because nothing had. Not on the surface. Out back, Beatrice raised her voice again. "This deal, it's just the beginning. Once this goes through, I'm positioned for major advancement. Dad lifted his glass. To Beatrice. The future of this family, everyone echoed it. Glasses up, smiles wide. I kept peeling, same steady rhythm, skin falling away in clean strips. No rush, no reaction, because now I knew exactly what I was looking at. A fraudulent contract, a compromised officer, and a financial trail that ran straight through the man calling me a failure. Beatrice stepped inside, grabbing the document stack and waving it slightly like she couldn't help herself. This, she said, grinning, is what real responsibility looks like. She believed that. That was the problem. I looked at her. Really looked this time. The uniform, the posture, the confidence, all built on something rotten. She raised her glass again, already celebrating a future she thought was locked in. I went back to the sink and rinsed my hands, watching the water run clear. She had no idea. Not about the company, not about the investigation, not about me. To her, I was still the quiet one in the kitchen, the one who didn't argue, the one who didn't matter. She lifted her glass higher, smiling like she had already won. And all I could think was this. The paper she's showing off right now is the exact piece of evidence I've been trying to find for the past 6 months. Have you ever sat at a table where everyone thought they knew exactly who you were, while you were the only one who actually knew what was coming next? I let the sound of her voice fade behind me and walked out of the house without saying goodbye. The drive back that night was quiet. No music, no calls, just the road and the steady replay of what I'd seen on that contract. By the time I pulled into my place, I already had a list in my head. Vendor ID, routing code, guarantee address, 3 threads, enough to pull the whole thing apart. I didn't sleep much. I didn't need to. At 0500, I was already on the road again. The Pentagon looks ordinary from the outside if you don't know where to go. Too many people, too many entrances, too much movement. That's the point. The part I work in isn't on any public map. 2 levels down, restricted access, no windows, no unnecessary traffic. I parked in a secured lot and walked straight past the main corridors, down a side hallway that ends in a reinforced glass door. No signage, no labels, just a scanner. I stepped forward. Identity confirmed, the system said as the retinal scan completed. The glass door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, the noise dropped off immediately. No chatter, no footsteps echoing, just controlled movement. 2 lieutenant colonels standing near the entrance snapped to attention the second I stepped through. "Good morning, ma'am." I gave a short nod and kept walking. No one asked questions. No one tried to make conversation. They all knew better. My office wasn't large, but it didn't need to be. Clean desk, secured terminal, 1 chair across from me that almost nobody ever used. I set my bag down and logged in. Multi-factor authentication, biometric confirmation, clearance verification, access level Alpha 0, full command authority. This is the part no one at that dinner table understands. They think power looks like a uniform at a barbecue. It doesn't. It looks like a locked system that only answers to you. I pulled up DFAS, Defense Finance and Accounting Service. Every dollar that moves through defense contracts touches the system at some point. If you know where to look, it tells you everything. I entered the vendor ID from Beatrice's contract. The system returned results immediately. Multiple transactions, layered accounts, split payments routed through different regions to avoid flags. Standard laundering pattern. Sloppy though, they were moving too fast. I opened the transaction tree and started tracing the flow. Primary contractor account, secondary shell accounts. Then the transfers broke off into smaller units, distribution nodes, and then I saw it. A familiar identifier, not the contractor, not Beatrice, me, my name. I didn't react, just clicked into it. The account wasn't one I had authorized. It wasn't tied to any official operation. It was a credit line, opened under my social security number. I leaned back slightly, letting the information settle. Then I went deeper. Account creation date. 3 months ago, initial deposit structured. Source multiple contractor-linked transfers. Purpose flagged as consulting income. I almost laughed. They didn't just steal, they built a cover. I pulled up the authorization documents attached to the account. Digital signatures, forgery, not even a good one, but enough to pass automated checks if no one looked closely. And no one had, because the account was designed to look like mine, which meant if this ever got audited, I'd be the one explaining it. I opened the transaction history and followed the money. From the contractor to the shell accounts, into this credit line, and then redistributed again, cleaned, repackaged, hidden under my identity. I tapped the desk once, slow and deliberate. Beatrice wasn't working alone. She didn't have the access or the patience to set something like this up on her own. I pulled the access logs, who initiated the account, who approved the documentation, who verified the identity. One name kept appearing, Arthur Sterling, my father. He used my information, opened a line of credit in my name, and turned it into a funnel for dirty money. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, not because I was surprised, but because I was confirming something I already suspected. He didn't just look down on me, he wrote me off, completely. To him, I was background noise. Someone he could use without consequences. Someone no one would defend. I closed the file and opened a secure channel. Patch me into internal audit, I said. Connected, the system replied. A kernel appeared on the screen. Ma'am, I need a silent review initiated on a contractor-linked account. No external flags, no notifications. Yes, ma'am. Scope full financial trace. Last 6 months. Prioritize anomalies tied to this identifier. I sent the file over. He scanned it quickly. His expression didn't change, but I saw the moment he understood what he was looking at. Understood, he said. We'll keep it contained. Good, I replied. I don't want them spooked. Yes, ma'am. The call ended. I turned back to the system and started pulling copies of everything. Transaction logs, authorization records, signature files, all stored in a secure partition only I could access, piece by piece, no rush. This wasn't about reacting, it was about control. Every move from here had to be precise. I pulled up Beatrice's contract again and cross-referenced it with the financial data. Same vendor, same routing patterns, same timeline. She signed off on the deal, Dad built the pipeline, and they both assumed no one would connect the two. Because the person in the middle was supposed to be invisible, I closed the system and leaned back in my chair. For a moment, the room was completely still. No noise, no interruptions, just a clear board. They thought I was a freeloader. A middle-aged woman with no direction, someone who wouldn't notice if her name got used on a piece of paperwork. Someone easy to blame. I reached into my drawer and pulled out a small black folder. In thought was the case file we'd been building for 6 months. Shell companies, suspicious contracts, unexplained financial movements, all of it pointing toward a network we hadn't fully exposed yet. Until now. I added the new documents to the file and closed it. The picture was complete. Not just corruption, not just fraud. This crossed into national security, which meant the rules were different. I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. 2 officers in the hallway straightened as I passed. Ma'am, I didn't stop. There was nothing to discuss. Everything I needed was already in motion. By the time they realized what they'd done, it would be too late to fix it. They thought I was an invisible freeloader, a shadow they could pin their mistakes on. But in my world, shadows aren't where you disappear. They're where you control the entire board. I didn't sit back down after closing the file. I issued the order. No meeting, no discussion. Just a direct command through a secured channel. Initiate asset freeze, I said, my voice steady. Target all accounts linked to this identifier chain. Full containment. No alerts. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then confirmed, ma'am. I ended the call. No drama, no buildup, just execution. Within seconds, the system would begin locking everything down, every account connected to that laundering pipeline. Every dollar they thought they could move. Gone. Frozen mid-transfer. That's the thing about financial crimes. People think it's about money. It's not. It's about timing. And I had just taken that away from them. By early afternoon, I was back in my car when my phone lit up. Dad. I let it ring twice before answering. What I said, no greeting, no warmth. He didn't deserve it. Get down to the bank. Now. His tone wasn't concerned. It was sharp. Commanding, like I still took orders from him. What bank, I asked. Our bank, he snapped. Don't play dumb. Something's wrong with the accounts. I didn't say anything. Victoria, I'm not asking. Get here. He hung up. I stared at the phone for a second, then set it down on the console. Right on schedule. I drove over without rushing. The bank was a small local branch. Nothing special. The kind of place where everyone pretends they know you even if they don't. As soon as I walked in, I heard them. Dad's voice. Raised. Sharp. Embarrassing. You're telling me I can't access my own money, he was saying. The branch manager stood behind the desk, trying to keep his tone calm. Sir, the account is currently restricted. We don't have the authority to override. That's ridiculous. Dad cut him off. I've been banking here for 20 years. Beatrice stood next to him, arms crossed, jaw tight. Still in uniform, she looked like she didn't belong in that room. Or maybe the room didn't belong to her anymore. I walked closer, not making any effort to announce myself. Dad saw me first. There you are, he snapped. What did you do? I tilted my head slightly. Excuse me, don't act stupid, he said. My cards are declined. The accounts are locked. This started this morning. What did you mess up this time? A couple of people nearby pretended not to listen. They were listening. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice colder. This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's careless. Always has been. I didn't respond. Let them keep going. Do you have any idea what kind of damage this causes? Beatrice continued. I have a transfer pending, a military contract. And now everything's frozen because you can't manage your own finances. I looked at her. Really looked. Still confident. Still convinced she was in control. She had no idea. Dad shook his head. I knew this would happen. I told you keeping her on anything financial was a mistake. I let a few seconds pass. Then I spoke. Are you done? That caught them off guard. Not the words. The tone. Flat. Controlled. Dad frowned. I stepped closer to the desk. The branch manager looked relieved that someone else was speaking calmly. Can you confirm something for me? I asked him. Yes, ma'am. Is this a standard bank restriction? He hesitated. No, ma'am. This appears to be a federal-level hold. We don't have visibility into the source. I nodded once. That was enough. Dad scoffed. Federal? That's nonsense. This is her mess. Beatrice turned to me again, impatience creeping in. We don't have time for this. I need that transfer cleared today. She reached into her bag and pulled out a document. Then she slid it across the desk toward me. Sign it, she said. I glanced down. Property transfer authorization. My name. My share of the house. Everything. She wanted it signed over. Immediately. Just sign it, she repeated. I'll take over the account management. Fix whatever damage you caused. Dad nodded. It's the least you can do. I picked up the pen, turned it once between my fingers, then looked back at the paper. This wasn't about the house. This was about control. About removing the last thing tied to my name so they could keep moving money without resistance. Beatrice leaned in slightly. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I didn't look at her. I signed. Slow, deliberate. One stroke slightly off. Just enough. Then I dropped the pen back onto the desk. Done. Beatrice grabbed the paper, immediately scanning it with a satisfied look. Finally, she muttered. Dad exhaled like a problem had just been solved. I straightened up, and then I spoke. The money wasn't locked by the bank. They both looked at me. I held their gaze. It was locked by the federal government. Silence. Not confusion, not yet. Just a brief gap where their brains tried to catch up. Beatrice's expression shifted for half a second. Just a flicker. Then it hardened again. That doesn't make any sense, she said quickly. Why would federal authorities freeze a personal account? I didn't answer. Because she already knew the answer. She just wasn't ready to accept it. Dad waved a hand dismissively. This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. I nodded once. Maybe. The branch manager stayed quiet. Smart man. Beatrice folded the document and slipped it back into her bag. Whatever this is, I'll handle it, she said. I have clearance. I can make a call and clear this up. Of course she thought that. Rank gives people a false sense of immunity, especially when they don't understand the system they're dealing with. I turned and started walking toward the door. Dad called after me. Where do you think you're going? I didn't stop. I'm done here, I said. Beatrice's voice followed sharper now. You better hope this doesn't come back on you. I pushed the door open and stepped outside. The air felt different, quieter, cleaner. Behind me, they were still talking, still trying to force control over something that had already slipped out of their hands. I reached into my pocket and checked my phone. One new notification. Internal confirmation. Trigger received. Review initiated. Good. Everything was moving exactly the way it should. Back inside, Beatrice probably thought she had just secured her position, that she'd taken control of the last piece she needed. She didn't realize what that signature actually did. She thought she took my way out. She had no idea she just triggered a full-scale criminal investigation. I left the bank without looking back and set the next move in motion before they even understood the last one. The following morning, I didn't go straight to the Pentagon. Instead, I drove in the opposite direction. The sedan I used wasn't impressive. 10 years old, clean but forgettable, the kind of car that disappears in a parking lot full of better options. That was the point. I pulled up to the outer access road of the Air Force Base where Beatrice was stationed. Security was layered, civilian checkpoint first, then internal clearance beyond that. Standard protocol. I parked near the visitor lot and stepped out wearing the same kind of plain clothes they were used to seeing me in. No uniform, no insignia, just the version of me they thought they understood. I walked toward the checkpoint at a normal pace. No rush, no hesitation. 2 guards stood at the gate scanning IDs and checking names against a list. Routine, predictable. I stopped a few feet back and waited my turn. And that's when I heard her voice. "Are you serious right now?" I didn't turn immediately. I didn't need to. I already knew. Beatrice. I shifted slightly, just enough to confirm. She was walking toward the checkpoint with 2 people beside her. One was a junior officer. The other, I recognized him from the contract file. The contractor. Her fiancé. He looked exactly like I expected. Expensive watch, controlled posture, the kind of guy who thinks confidence can replace caution. Beatrice saw me, and everything changed. Her expression snapped from casual to sharp in less than a second. Not fear, not yet, annoyance. Like I had shown up somewhere I didn't belong. Perfect. She slowed her pace, then angled directly toward me. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear. The guards glanced over, so did a few other people in line. I stayed where I was, calm. She stepped closer, stopping just outside my personal space. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I looked at her, didn't answer. She let out a short, irritated laugh and turned toward the guards. "This woman doesn't have clearance to be here," she said, pointing at me like I was a problem to be handled. "She's a civilian. She's been following me." That got attention. The guards straightened. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am, we're going to need to verify that." Beatrice folded her arms, clearly enjoying the moment. "You don't need to verify anything. I'm telling you, she doesn't belong here." Her fiancé watched quietly, but I saw the shift in his eyes. He was evaluating, noticing. He wasn't as careless as she was. Still too late. "She's probably trying to get access to restricted areas," Beatrice continued. "You need to remove her from the premises." The second guard moved to my side. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the gate." I didn't move, didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my coat. That was enough to make both guards tense slightly. Right response. Unknown movement, unknown intent. I pulled out a single card. Black border, no decoration, no explanation. I stepped forward and held it to the scanner. The system processed it instantly. 1 second, 2. Then green light, not a soft one. A full confirmation sequence. The screen changed. Red banner across the top. Clearance level Alpha 0 rank General O10 access. Unrestricted, everything stopped. The guard who had stepped toward me froze for half a second. Then both of them snapped back. Straight posture, heels together. Sharp, clean salute. "Ma'am." The tone changed completely. No uncertainty, no hesitation, just recognition. "Clear to proceed, General." One of them said. Behind them, the line had gone quiet. People were staring, trying to process what they had just seen. I lowered my hand and took the card back. Simple motion, nothing dramatic, because for me, this was routine. For them, it wasn't. I stepped forward, past the checkpoint, then I stopped, turned slightly, just enough to look back. Beatrice hadn't moved. Her face had lost all color, not pale, not nervous, empty, like her brain had shut down trying to catch up with reality. Her fiancé was staring at me too, but his reaction was different. He understood faster. You could see it. The shift from curiosity to calculation, then to something else. Concern. Good. He should be concerned. Beatrice opened her mouth, closed it again. Nothing came out. For the first time in her life, she didn't have anything to say. I held her gaze for 1 more second. Then I turned and walked through the gate. No rush, no need. Behind me, the guards were still locked in position. They wouldn't relax until I was fully clear. Protocol. Inside the base. Everything moved like it was supposed to. Structured, controlled, efficient, the way it should be. I didn't look back again. There was nothing left to confirm. She had made her move, publicly, loudly. And it had collapsed in seconds. Not because I stopped her, because she exposed herself. That's the problem with people who rely on status. They think it protects them everywhere. It doesn't. Not when they step into a system they don't understand. I walked toward the administrative building, already shifting focus to what I came here for. Physical records, chain of custody logs, anything that didn't exist in the digital system. Because when people get sloppy, they leave traces offline. And I intended to collect all of them. Behind me, somewhere outside that gate, Beatrice was still standing there, still trying to process what just happened, still trying to rebuild control in her head. But control doesn't come back once it's gone. Not like that. I stepped inside the building and headed straight for records. No hesitation, no distractions. Because the look on her face back at the checkpoint, that wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I walked past security without slowing down, already planning the next move. And as the door closed behind me, one thing was clear. The panic she felt at that gate, that was just the appetizer. Thanksgiving was going to be the main course. I walked out of the records office with everything I needed and let the door close behind me without slowing down. The file was complete now. Digital trail, physical confirmation, chain of custody gaps. Every piece lined up clean, which meant the next step wasn't gathering. It was pressure. People like Beatrice don't fold because of evidence. They fold because of fear. And fear only works when it feels personal. That night I went back to Dad's house. Same driveway, same porch light, same forced sense of normal. Inside, the atmosphere was different. Quieter, tighter, no music, no laughter, just low voices and short conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. Good. That meant the pressure was already working. Beatrice was at the kitchen table with her laptop open, typing fast, then stopping, then typing again. Frustration. She didn't look up when I came in, didn't say anything. Dad glanced at me from the living room, then looked away just as quickly. No comments this time, no jokes, just avoidance. I poured myself a cup of tea like I lived there. Because technically, I still did, for now. I sat down on the couch, tablet in my lap, calm, quiet, invisible again. The way they preferred me, the way they understood me. Beatrice finally snapped her laptop shut. "This is ridiculous," she muttered. "None of this makes sense." Her fiancé's voice came through the speaker on her phone. "Then fix it. We have a deadline." "I'm trying," she shot back. "Everything is locked." "That's not my problem," he said, colder now. "You said you had control." I didn't look up, but I listened. Carefully, "I do," she insisted. "There's just something interfering." There was a pause on the line, then quieter. "If this deal collapses, it's not just you who gets burned." The call ended. Beatrice sat there for a second, staring at the screen of her phone. Then she stood up abruptly and walked out of the room. I took a slow sip of tea, counted to 10, then activated the tablet. Live feed came up instantly. Exterior camera, driveway, my car, right on time. Beatrice stepped outside, moving fast but trying to look casual. She glanced toward the street, then toward the house. Then she reached into her pocket. Spare key. Of course she had one. Dad always kept backups of everything. And she always knew where to find them. She walked straight to my car and unlocked it. No hesitation now. No second thoughts. Desperation does that. It convinces people they're being smart when they're actually being predictable. I leaned back slightly on the couch, watching the screen. She opened the driver's side door and started going through the interior. Glove compartment, center console, under the seat. Faster now, less controlled. She knew she was running out of time. Then she found it. The USB, black, unmarked, exactly where I wanted it. She picked it up, turning it over once like she expected it to say something. Then she smiled, small, sharp, like she had just solved everything. I took another sip of tea, didn't rush, didn't react, because this part was already done. She locked the car, pocketed the USB, and walked back inside. I turned the tablet, slightly angling it so I could still see without making it obvious. She passed through the living room without looking at me, straight to her room, door closed. A few seconds later, the second feed activated. Internal, laptop camera, clear view of her desk. She sat down, plugged in the USB, and waited. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the screen flickered. That's when it started. The tracker activated instantly. No delay, no warning, just execution. Her entire system opened up in the background. File structures mapped, storage indexed, hidden directories exposed. Every document she thought was safe wasn't. Data began transferring, fast, silent, directly to a secure server. Every contract, every message, every record tied to the deal, pulled clean. At the same time, the second function triggered. Signal sent, priority channel, Pentagon server, classification level 1 national security breach. No human needed to push it. No delay. No override. Once it started, it didn't stop. Beatrice leaned closer to the screen, frowning. "This isn't right," she muttered. She clicked through folders, opened files, tried to trace what she was seeing, but she wasn't seeing the real process, just the surface, the illusion of control. Then the screen went black. Not a crash, not a glitch, a lockout, hard stop. She froze. She then hit the keyboard. Nothing. Again. Harder. Still nothing. What the hell? She stood up, pacing once, then sat back down and tried again. Faster now. Panicked. The system didn't respond, because it wasn't hers anymore. I watched everything from the couch, completely still. No expression, no movement, just confirmation. The board had closed. Every piece locked in place. She thought she had stolen access. What she actually did was identify herself as the source. Directly, clearly, irreversibly. Dad called from the other room. "Everything okay?" "No," she snapped. "My computer just died." I lowered the tablet slightly, took another slow sip of tea, let the silence settle around me, because this was the moment everything changed. Not at the bank, not at the gate. Here, where she made the choice herself. No pressure, no force, just panic and a mistake. She slammed her hand on the desk. The sound echoed through the house. "I had it," she said under her breath. "I had it." "No, you didn't. You never did." I stood up quietly, setting the empty cup down on the table. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. I walked past her door without looking in. Didn't need to. I already knew what I'd see. A screen gone dark, a plan falling apart, a person realizing too late that they walked into something they didn't understand. Behind that door, she hit the keyboard again. Harder this time. Like force would fix it. It didn't, and it wouldn't, because she thought she had just taken control of the situation. What she actually did was sign her own conviction. I set the tablet down, left the house without a word, and let the silence behind me do exactly what it was supposed to do. By the time Thanksgiving came around, the pressure had settled in. Not loud, not obvious, but constant, like something sitting just under the surface, waiting. The house was full again. Same backyard, same dining room, same people who showed up every year, like tradition was something you could follow without asking questions. Only this time, the energy was different. Quieter conversations, forced smiles, people checking their phones more than usual. They didn't know why, but they felt it. I walked in carrying nothing. No dish, no gift, no effort to play along. A couple of relatives nodded at me, polite, distant, the way people acknowledge someone they don't quite understand but don't want to ignore completely. I took my seat at the table without asking where I should sit. Same spot as always, same view. Beatrice was already there, perfect posture, perfect uniform again, but her hands gave her away, tight grip on the fork, slight tension in her shoulders. She hadn't slept well. Good. Her fiancé sat beside her, quieter than before, less confident, watching more than talking. He had figured out something was wrong. He just didn't know how deep it went. Dad stood at the head of the table, glass of red wine in hand. Same routine, same performance. He cleared his throat. Everyone looked up. Family, he started smiling like everything was exactly the way he wanted it. Another year, another Thanksgiving. A few people murmured agreement. He raised his glass slightly. And this year we have even more to celebrate. Of course we do. He turned toward Beatrice. My daughter, he said, pride clear in his voice. Captain, making real moves, real impact. Beatrice smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. She's out there doing something that matters, he continued. Serving her country, leading. People nodded, some clapped lightly. Her fiancé put a hand on her arm, like he was reinforcing the image. Dad took a sip, then set the glass down, and then he shifted, subtle but intentional. And then he said, voice changing just enough, we have the rest of us. A few people chuckled. Not sure where he was going, I kept eating, didn't look up, didn't react. He let the pause stretch just long enough. Then he tapped his fork against his glass. Clear, sharp. The room went quiet. "I think it's time we address something," he said. There it was, right on schedule. He turned his full attention toward me. "Victoria." I set my fork down, slowly, looked up, met his eyes. No expression, just attention. "You've been living under this roof," he said. "Benefiting from this family without contributing anything meaningful." A few heads turned. Some people shifted in their chairs. No one interrupted him. Of course they didn't. "You've caused problems with your sister's accounts," he continued. "Created unnecessary stress, complications." I didn't move, didn't argue. Let him build it, because that's what he was doing. Building a moment, a performance. "You're 45 years old," he said, voice getting sharper. "No real career, no rank, no direction." Beatrice stared straight ahead. Didn't stop him, didn't support him either. She just let it happen. Dad leaned forward slightly. "And let's be honest," he said. "You're a freeloader." The word landed exactly the way he wanted it to. Heavy, final. A few people looked down at their plates. Others glanced at me waiting for something, an argument, a reaction, anything. I gave them nothing. Dad continued more confident now. "Starting next month, you're going to contribute. $5,000 a month, rent, silence. You either pay your way," he added, "or you pack your things and leave, for good. No hesitation, no softening, just a decision." He leaned back in his chair like he had just settled something, like he had restored order. The room stayed quiet. No one spoke. No one defended me. They were watching, measuring, waiting to see how I would respond. Break down, push back, walk out. I reached for my glass of water, took a small sip, set it back down, then picked up my napkin and wiped my hands. Calm, clean, controlled. I looked at him, then at Beatrice, then around the table, every face, every expression, all of them expecting the same thing, a reaction. I didn't give it to them, because this wasn't the moment for emotion. This was the moment for precision. Dad thought he was forcing a choice. Pay or leave, stay or go. He thought he was in control. He thought he was setting the terms. What he didn't understand was that I had already made my decision long before this dinner started. He just hadn't caught up yet. I folded the napkin neatly and set it beside my plate. Then I leaned back slightly in my chair, still calm, still quiet, still exactly who they thought I was. A freeloader, invisible, disposable. Dad watched me waiting, expecting something, anything. I met his gaze and held it. No anger, no frustration, just clarity. He wanted me to pay for a seat at this table, to prove I belonged, to earn my place in a system he controlled. That was the part he got wrong. I didn't need to earn anything here, and I definitely wasn't paying for it. Because I didn't bring cash tonight. What I brought instead was worth a lot more than $5,000. I reached into my coat pocket and felt the edge of the paper before I even pulled it out. No rush, no hesitation. I looked at my father one more time, then spoke. A freeloader. My voice stayed level. No emotion, no edge, just a question. The room didn't move. No one interrupted, because they all felt it. Something had shifted. I picked up my napkin again, wiped my mouth once more like I had all the time in the world, then folded it neatly into quarters and placed it beside my plate. Still calm, still controlled. Then I reached into my coat and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Light blue, official stock, embossed seal. I held it for a second, then slid it across the table. Not tossed, not dramatic, just a smooth push across polished wood. It stopped right in front of him. Perfect. Dad frowned, not confused, annoyed, like I had just handed him something pointless. "What is this?" he asked. I leaned back slightly. "Go ahead," I said. He picked it up. At first his expression didn't change. He skimmed it, casual, dismissive. Then his eyes slowed. His hand tightened slightly around the paper. He looked again, closer this time. The room stayed silent. No one moved. No one spoke. You could feel it, the shift. His breathing changed first, shorter, less steady. His fingers adjusted their grip like he wasn't sure how hard he needed to hold it. Then his eyes widened. Not all at once, just enough, like something didn't make sense and he was trying to force it to. "What is this?" he said again. Quieter this time. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Beatrice leaned over. Fast, too fast. What are you? She stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes locked onto the paper, and just like that, everything drained out of her face. Not shock, not confusion, recognition, immediate, absolute. Her mouth opened slightly. No sound came out. She grabbed the edge of the paper, pulling it closer, reading it again, then again, like she thought it might change if she looked long enough. It didn't. Dad was still staring at it. Frozen, the words were simple, clear, unavoidable. Victoria Sterling, rank 010, General. Joint Command Allowance, base pay, monthly, real numbers, real authority, no room for interpretation. The silence stretched. No one at the table knew what they were looking at exactly, but they knew it wasn't small. They knew it wasn't normal. They knew something had just broken. Beatrice's voice came out first. Barely. Dad, she swallowed. Do you even understand what you're holding? He didn't respond. Didn't look at her. Couldn't. His eyes were locked on the page like it might disappear if he blinked. I let it sit. Let them process, let them feel it, because this was the moment. The one they never saw coming. The one they built themselves into. I leaned forward slightly, rested my hands on the table, and spoke. You're asking me to pay rent, I said. Still calm, still steady. You're asking me to contribute to a house tied to a fraudulent financial pipeline. Dad's jaw tightened. He finally looked up. At me. But this time there was no arrogance, no control, just confusion, and something else. Fear. I held his gaze, didn't look away. You called me a freeloader, I continued. No anger, no raised voice, just facts. You told me I don't have a career. No rank, no direction. Beatrice stepped back slightly from the table. Like distance would help. It didn't. I let a small smile form. Not warm, not friendly, just enough. Tell me something, I said. I tilted my head slightly. Are you seriously asking a 4-star general on active duty to pay rent using money you helped steal from the government? No one moved. No one even breathed too loudly, because now they understood. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know they had been wrong. Completely. Dad's hand started to shake. Small at first, then more noticeable. The paper moved slightly with it. His mouth opened, closed. No words, no argument, no recovery. Beatrice looked at me again. This time she wasn't trying to dominate the room. She wasn't performing. She was calculating. Too late. Her fiancé sat frozen in his chair, eyes moving between me and the paper. Like he was trying to find an exit that didn't exist. There wasn't one. I leaned back again, relaxed, composed, like nothing had changed. Because for me, nothing had. This was just the truth catching up. Dad finally spoke. Barely. You're lying. Weak. Even he didn't believe it. I shook my head once. No, that was it. No explanation, no defense. Just the truth. And the truth doesn't need backup. The room stayed quiet. No one rushed to fix it. No one tried to smooth it over, because there was nothing to fix. The illusion was gone, completely. Everything they thought they understood about me, gone. Everything they used to measure me, worthless. I reached forward and tapped the edge of the paper once. Light, controlled. You might want to hold on to that, I said. It's the most accurate thing you've seen all year. Dad didn't respond. He couldn't. Beatrice didn't move. She couldn't. Because they were both doing the same thing now, trying to figure out how far this actually went. They still didn't know, but they were about to. Outside, faint at first, then clear, the sound of sirens. Not close yet, but coming. Lights flickered faintly through the curtains. Red, blue, unmistakable. I didn't turn, didn't need to. I already knew. The paystub was enough to break their arrogance, but it wasn't what was going to end them. That part was pulling up outside. I didn't turn toward the window when the sirens got louder. I just sat there and let the sound fill the room. No one else could ignore it. Heads turned. Conversations died before they even started. The tension that had been building all night finally had a direction. Then the lights hit. Red and blue flashing through the curtains, cutting across the walls, the table, the faces. Beatrice stood up too fast, her chair scraping hard against the floor. What is that? She said, voice sharp, unstable. No one answered, because everyone already knew this wasn't random. This wasn't a coincidence. This was coming here. For a second, everything froze. Then the sound of doors slamming outside. Heavy footsteps, fast, precise. The front door didn't get a polite knock. It burst open. 4 agents moved in first. Body armor, clean formation, eyes scanning, locking onto targets instantly. Behind them, more followed. CID, FBI. No hesitation, no confusion, just execution. Federal agents, one of them called out. "Everyone stay where you are." The room erupted. Chairs moved, people stood, voices overlapped. "What's going on? Is this a mistake?" "Oh my God," Beatrice grabbed Dad's arm, hard. "Dad," she shouted, "do something." Her voice cracked. The confidence was gone now, completely. "They're here because of her," she said, pointing at me. "She set this up. She's been trying to sabotage me." I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even look at her, because this part wasn't about me anymore. Dad stood up, still holding the paystub in one hand, like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, trying to pull his voice together. "I'm a retired major. You don't just storm into my house like this." No one responded to him. Not one agent even acknowledged him, because he didn't matter. Not in this room, not in this moment. One of the agents stepped forward, scanning the room again. Then his eyes landed on me. Everything changed. He adjusted his posture instantly, walked straight past everyone else, and stopped directly in front of me. Then he stood at attention, sharp, clean, exact, and saluted. "Ma'am." The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Because that was the moment everything finally made sense. Not the paystub, not the contract. This. I returned the salute with a slight nod. "At ease," I said. He lowered his hand. "Report," I added. His voice stayed steady. "Professional. All target servers secured. Financial accounts frozen. Evidence confirmed. Primary suspects identified and contained." I didn't ask for details. I already had them. "Good," I said. Behind him, 2 agents moved toward Beatrice. She stepped back immediately. No, wait," she said, panic rising fast now. "There's been a mistake. I didn't do anything wrong." One of the agents took hold of her wrist. Firm, controlled. She tried to pull away. "Dad," she shouted. Tell them I'm a captain, this is classified." The second agent secured her other arm. Metal cuffs snapped into place. Loud, final. Her fiancé didn't even try to argue. He raised his hand slightly, like he knew exactly how this ended. They cuffed him too. Clean, efficient, no struggle. Because he understood something Beatrice still didn't. This wasn't negotiable. Beatrice's voice broke completely. "This is insane," she shouted. "I have clearance. I have authority." "No, you don't," one of the agents said calmly. "Not anymore." They started moving her toward the door. She twisted back, looking at me. Not angry anymore. Not confident. Desperate. "You did this," she said, voice shaking. "You set me up." I met her eyes. Calm. Steady. "No," I said. "You did." She didn't have a response. Because she knew. Deep down, she knew. Dad didn't move. He just stood there staring at me like he was seeing someone he didn't recognize. The paystub slipped slightly in his hand. "May," he said, voice barely holding together. "May lam the nave ching zading ming sao." I stood up. Slowly, buttoned my coat, took one step forward. Now I was the one standing. He was the one looking up. I held his gaze. No anger, no hesitation. "Uniforms don't protect traitors, Arthur," I said. I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. And blood doesn't protect thieves. That landed harder than anything else, because there was nothing emotional in it. Just truth. Simple, direct, final. He sank back into his chair, like something inside him had just given out. Around the room, the rest of the family stood frozen. No one spoke. No one tried to step in, because now they understood exactly what this was. Not a family argument, not a misunderstanding, a federal case. Beatrice was still shouting as they led her out. Her voice fading, her control gone, completely. Her fiancé stayed quiet. Head down, accepting it, smart. I turned away from the table. No reason to stay, nothing left to say. The agents cleared the room quickly after that. Professional, clean, like this was just another operation. Because to them it was. I walked out the front door without looking back. The cold air hit immediately, sharp, clear. The flashing lights reflected off the driveway, the house, everything. 4 black SUVs lined up outside, engines running, doors open, waiting. I stepped down the porch slowly, no rush, no weight left to carry. Behind me, the house was still loud, voices, movement, confusion, all of it fading with every step I took. I reached the first SUV. The driver was already in position. He glanced at me through the window. I tapped lightly on the glass. He rolled it down. "Ma'am." I looked straight ahead. "Take me back to base," I said. A brief pause, then he nodded. "Yes, ma'am." I opened the door and got in. The engine shifted. The door closed. And just like that, it was over. No more pretending. No more silence. No more playing small to keep the peace. I looked out the window as the house disappeared behind us. Thanksgiving lights still on, doors still open, everything inside falling apart. And none of it followed me. "Dinner's over," I said quietly. The driver didn't respond. He didn't need to, because we both knew this wasn't about dinner. This was about ending something that should have never been allowed to start. I sat in the back of the SUV and watched the city pass by without really looking at it. No calls, no follow-ups, no noise. Everything that needed to happen was already in motion. And that's the part most people don't understand. They think the moment at the table was the win. It wasn't. That was just the reveal. The real work happened long before anyone raised their voice. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a second, not to rest, but to think clearly. Because if you're watching this thinking, "I wish I could do what she did," you're already looking at it the wrong way. This wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about not needing to. There's a difference. Most people, when they're underestimated, react immediately. They argue, they defend themselves. They try to correct the narrative. They want validation, and that's exactly why they lose control. Because the moment you start explaining your value to someone who already decided you don't have any, you're playing their game. And you're playing it on their terms. I never corrected my father. Not once. I never told Beatrice what I actually did. I never argued when they called me useless. That wasn't weakness, that was discipline. Because I wasn't trying to win the conversation. I was preparing to control the outcome. That's the first thing you need to understand. If someone underestimates you, you don't fix that. You use it. When people think you're irrelevant, they stop filtering what they say around you. They get careless. They expose things they wouldn't normally expose. They leave doors open. And if you're paying attention, really paying attention, those doors lead exactly where you need them to go. At that barbecue, when Beatrice left that contract sitting out like a trophy, she thought she was showing power. What she actually showed me was everything I needed to dismantle her. She didn't hide it because she didn't think I could understand it. That's how this works. People don't protect themselves from what they don't respect. So let me give you something you can actually use. If you're in a situation where people constantly talk down to you at work, in your family, anywhere, stop trying to correct them. Stop trying to prove them wrong in real time. Instead, do 3 things. First, observe. Not casually, not emotionally, precisely. Listen to what they say when they think you're not important. Watch what they do when they think no one is paying attention. Patterns matter more than opinions. Second, document. You don't need a full investigation like mine, but you do need clarity. Keep track of actions, not just words. Because when things escalate, and they will, you need facts, not feelings. Third, choose your timing. This is where most people fail. They react too early. They expose what they know before it's useful. And that gives the other person time to adjust, deny, or shift blame. I didn't confront Beatrice when I saw the contract. I didn't confront my father when I saw my name on that account. I waited. I built the case. I made sure that when the truth came out, there was nothing left to argue about. That's the difference between reacting and controlling. And here's something else you need to hear. Being underestimated is uncomfortable. It gets under your skin. It makes you feel small if you let it. But it also gives you something most people don't have: freedom. Freedom to move without being watched. Freedom to gather information without resistance. Freedom to prepare without interference. Most people give that up because they can't stand the feeling of being dismissed. They trade long-term control for short-term validation. Don't do that. If someone wants to believe you're nothing, let them. As long as you know exactly what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, respect that's forced through arguments doesn't last. Respect that comes from undeniable reality that sticks. When my father looked at that paper, I didn't need to explain anything. When Beatrice saw it, I didn't need to defend myself. The truth was already built. All I had to do was show it. That's where you want to be. Not louder, not more emotional, just undeniable. So if you take anything from what happened, take this. You don't need to win every moment. You need to win the right one. And the right moment only works if you've prepared for it before anyone else even realizes there's a game being played. I kept my eyes forward as the SUV merged onto the highway and let the quiet stretch just long enough to think clearly. Because what happened that night wasn't just about exposure. It was about understanding how something like that happens in the first place. And if you're watching this thinking, that would never happen in my family, you might want to look a little closer. Because the most dangerous betrayal doesn't show up as a big, obvious moment. It builds quietly, it looks normal, it sounds reasonable, and that's exactly why people miss it. My father didn't wake up one day and decide to commit fraud. He didn't think of himself as the villain. He thought he was being practical. Using what was available, solving a problem, that's how it starts. Small decisions that don't feel like a big deal at the time. Using someone's information because it's family. Moving money around because it'll be fixed later. Signing something on someone else's behalf because it's easier this way. Individually, each action looks minor. Together, they build something you can't control anymore. And by the time it becomes a problem, it's already too late to undo it quietly. That's the second thing you need to understand. Betrayal rarely feels like betrayal in the beginning. It feels like convenience. It feels like trust. It feels like something you don't question because you've been conditioned not to. That's where most people get trapped. They confuse access with permission. Just because someone can reach into your life, your finances, your identity, your decisions doesn't mean they should. And if you don't draw that line early, someone else will erase it for you. My father didn't see a boundary. He saw an opportunity, and Beatrice didn't question it. She built on it. That's how systems like that grow, not through one bad decision, but through a series of unchecked ones. So let's bring this back to something you can actually use. If you want to avoid ending up in a situation like that, you need to take control of 3 things. First, your information. Your name, your financial accounts, your legal identity. Those are not shared assets. Not with family, not with anyone. If your name is on something, you need to know exactly why, exactly where, and exactly how it's being used. No assumptions. No, I trust them. Trust doesn't replace verification. Second, your boundaries. And I'm not talking about saying no once in a while. I'm talking about setting a standard and holding it. If someone crosses a line and there's no consequence, that line doesn't exist. People don't respect boundaries you don't enforce. Even if they're family, especially if they're family. Third, your awareness. Pay attention to patterns, not excuses. If someone repeatedly puts you in uncomfortable positions, makes decisions for you, or treats your role as insignificant, that's not personality. That's behavior. And behavior scales. If they're willing to take small liberties, now they'll take bigger ones later. That's not speculation, that's consistency. And here's something most people don't want to admit. Loyalty, when it's used the wrong way, becomes a liability. You stay quiet because you don't want to cause problems. You let things slide because it's family. You avoid confrontation because it feels uncomfortable. And while you're doing all of that, the situation gets worse, not better. Loyalty without accountability is just permission. And permission over time turns into control. That's exactly what happened in my house. They didn't think they were doing anything extreme. They thought they were operating within a system they controlled. They just forgot one thing. They didn't control me. And that's where everything fell apart. So if you take anything from this part of the story, make it this: don't wait for something to become a crisis before you pay attention. Don't assume people will stop on their own. And don't confuse familiarity with safety. Sometimes the people closest to you have the easiest access and the least resistance. That doesn't make them evil, but it does make them capable of doing damage if you're not paying attention. You don't need to live paranoid, but you do need to stay aware. Because once your name, your identity, or your financial footprint gets pulled into something you didn't control, you don't get to explain your way out of it later. You either have proof or you have a problem. And the difference between those two outcomes comes down to one thing: whether you were paying attention when it still looked normal. I watched the city lights blur past the window and let the silence sit for a moment before I spoke again. Because if you've made it this far, you deserve something more than just a story. You deserve clarity, and I'm going to be direct with you. If you see this as a revenge story, you're missing the point. I didn't do any of this to get even. I didn't do it to prove I was better. And I definitely didn't do it because I was angry. I did it because there were lines that got crossed, and in my world, lines like that come with consequences. That's the difference most people struggle with. They think power is about control over people. It's not. It's about control over yourself, your timing, your decisions, your reactions. Most people lose before anything even happens because they react too early. They get emotional, they argue, they try to force outcomes before they've built the foundation for them. And once you do that, you give the other person something to work with. They adapt, they deny, they shift the narrative. That's how situations drag on for years. Endless arguments, endless family drama. Nothing actually changes, just different versions of the same problem. I didn't argue, I didn't negotiate, I didn't give them a chance to adjust. By the time they realized what was happening, it was already over. That's not cold, that's effective. So let me break this down into something you can actually apply. If you're dealing with a situation where someone is disrespecting you, using you, or crossing lines, don't react immediately. Take a step back. Ask yourself one question. Do I have enough information to end this properly? Not to argue, not to confront, to end it. If the answer is no, then you're not ready to act. And acting anyway will only make things worse. Second, separate emotion from execution. You're allowed to feel whatever you feel. Anger, frustration, disappointment, that's normal. But the moment you let those emotions drive your decisions, you lose precision. And without precision, you lose control. I didn't move when I was upset. I moved when everything was in place. That's the difference. Third, when you act, make it final. This is where most people fail. They leave gaps. They leave room for explanations, for second chances that aren't earned, for the situation to reset itself, and then they're right back where they started. If something needs to end it completely. No half measures, no hesitation, because partial action creates permanent problems. And here's something else you need to understand. Not every situation requires the level of response I used, but every situation does require clarity. You need to know what you're dealing with. You need to know where your line is, and you need to know what happens when that line gets crossed. If you don't define that, someone else will, and you probably won't like the outcome. Now let's be real for a second. A lot of people stay stuck in bad situations because they're waiting for things to get better. They wait for apologies. They wait for change. They wait for someone else to fix it. That almost never works because the people benefiting from the situation have no reason to change it. Change happens when there are consequences, clear ones, real ones, not threats, not arguments, consequences. That's what forces adjustment. That's what resets the system. And that's what most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable. But discomfort is temporary. Being stuck is not. So if you've ever felt like the quiet one in the room, the one people overlook, the one people assume doesn't matter, good, that's not a disadvantage. That's a position. And if you use it correctly, it's one of the strongest positions you can have. Because while everyone else is focused on being seen, you have the opportunity to understand everything. And understanding is what gives you control. Not noise, not attention, not approval, control. That's what this story was really about. Not revenge, not ego, not proving anything to anyone, just control. So if you've been watching this as one of those family stories or family drama situations that feel a little too real, take something from it. Don't just watch it, sit. And if you want more stories like this, real situations, real pressure, real decisions, these kinds of revenge stories that actually mean something, go ahead and subscribe. Because I'm not here to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to show you how things actually work. And what you do with that is up to you.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.